Title: The Nether Cat of the Mourning River. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed listeners, welcome to today's edition of Midnight Ghost Stories. Dim your lights, lock your doors, and let the shadows lengthen. Our story today begins in a destitute, forgotten village nestled beside the Mourning River. This small tributary, branching off from the great main river, runs with murky, turbulent waters all year round, as if it carries the boundless grievances of countless lost souls drifting in the underworld. In that desolate village, where the fog clung to the earth like a burial shroud, stood a traditional three-compartment house roofed with yin-yang tiles. The wavy, alternating tiles resembled the scales of a dying dragon. The lime plaster of the walls had peeled and blistered, looking like the skin of a leper abandoned to the elements. The house sat isolated beneath the sprawling, gnarled roots of an ancient banyan tree, its aerial roots hanging down like the hair of drowned widows. This was the home of Silas. Silas was a man in his late 50s, an age when a man ought to be tending to his garden, sipping chrysanthemum tea, and enjoying the twilight of his years. But for Silas, life was nothing but a relentless grind of sorrow and grime. He made his living scavenging driftwood from the treacherous currents of the Mourning River, and occasionally, he took on the grim task of exhuming and relocating graves for wealthy families. It was a lowly, taboo profession. The villagers looked upon him with a mixture of pity and deep-seated superstitious dread. It was whispered that those who spent their lives digging up the dead absorbed the necrotic chi, the miasma of the grave. His skin was perpetually cold, and his clothes always carried the faint, sickly sweet scent of damp earth and decaying lilies. Silas had a young wife named Evelyn. Evelyn was barely in her early 20s, her beauty in full, intoxicating bloom. She had eyes like phoenixes, eyebrows like delicate willow leaves, and skin as pale and flawless as a peel egg. She was a stark contrast to the sun-baked, rough-hewn women of the village. Evelyn had not married Silas for love, she was sold to him to pay off her parents' crippling gambling debts. On the day she crossed the threshold of his home, the sky had torn open with a torrential downpour, lightning cleaving the heavens like a jagged scar, foreshadowing a marriage drowning in storms and tears. Down in the sweltering, soot-stained kitchen, Evelyn was violently washing dishes. The ceramic bowls clattered and smashed against each other with a harsh, grating noise. She was doing it on purpose, letting the cacophony echo into the main house to assert her dominance, to punish her husband. She despised this suffocating poverty. She loathed the sour stench of sweat and the pungent odor of grave dirt that clung to Silas's skin. She craved the rustle of fine silk, the clack of lacquered wooden clogs on stone pavements, and the vibrant lantern-lit festivals of the provincial capital. Instead, she was burying her youth beside a clumsy, aging grave robber. Wife! Is the rice done yet? Why does it take so long? Silas's raspy voice echoed from the main room, sounding like dry leaves scraping across a tombstone. Evelyn sneered, her face twisting in disgust. She hoisted the bamboo tray and marched into the main room, slamming it down onto the woven mat so hard that the bowl of watery morning glory soup sloshed over, staining the mat. Eat! All you know how to do is rush me, she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. The rice bin is empty. Tomorrow, you better find a way to make some money, or I refuse to starve any longer. That night, the couple lay on their narrow bed. Silas tossed and turned, his mind heavy with worry. Beside him, Evelyn lay with her back to him, her breathing steady, but he knew she was awake. He reached out a calloused, scarred hand to gently touch her shoulder, wanting to offer some hollow words of comfort. Evelyn violently shrugged his hand away. Leave me alone. I'm exhausted, she hissed. Silas withdrew his hand, his heart aching with a familiar, dull throb. He curled up under a threadbare, moth-eaten blanket, listening to the wind whistling through the cracks in the bamboo walls. Suddenly, the faint, mournful sound of a dog howling drifted from the village entrance. It wasn't the sharp bark at a stranger. It was a long, drawn-out wail, a sound of grinding teeth and profound sorrow, rising and falling like a wolf weeping at the moon, before cutting off into a terrifying, abrupt silence. Silas shivered. Having spent decades exhuming corpses, he knew the omens of the spirit world. The elders said, "A dog barks at the living, but a dog wails at the dead." When a dog howls like a crying woman and then suddenly chokes into silence, it means a malevolent ghost is manifesting, or a violent, unnatural death is imminent. The next morning, before the dawn mist had even lifted, Silas rose. He packed a small bundle of rice balls and sesame salt, tucked his curved machete into his sash, and called out to his wife. "I'm going upstream toward the Forbidden Peak. I heard there are rare medicinal herbs growing on the cliffs. Maybe I can sell them and fix the leaking roof." Evelyn was sitting on the veranda, combing her long, black hair. She didn't even turn her head. "Go wherever you want. Just bring back money. Don't bring back a corpse and burden me with a funeral." Silas offered a bitter, hollow smile and stepped out the gate. His silhouette faded into the thick, milky fog, looking more like a wandering specter than a living man. He did not know that this fateful journey would alter his destiny forever, and serve as the prologue to a blood-soaked tragedy that would consume his home. Silas followed the treacherous banks of the Mourning River deep into the wilderness. The further he went, the more desolate the landscape became. Ancient, twisted trees blocked out the sun, their roots tangled like serpents. The cries of gibbons and the shrieks of unseen birds sent shivers down his spine. The Forbidden Peak was a place of deep taboo. Legend held that centuries ago, it was the hidden stronghold of a notorious bandit king. They had buried mountains of stolen gold and jade in the deep caves, sealing them with dark blood magic and curses. Anyone greedy enough to seek the treasure either vanished forever or returned completely mad, babbling about headless demons. But Silas was driven to the brink. The crushing poverty and his wife's biting contempt had turned him into a desperate gambler with his own life. "If I'm going to suffer anyway," he thought, "I might as well risk it all." He hacked through the dense, gloomy undergrowth, wading through streams so cold they felt like liquid needles. By noon, despite the sun being at its zenith, the canopy above was so thick that it felt like twilight. He stopped to rest beneath a sheer, vertical cliff face. As he reached for his rice ball, his eyes caught a glimmer of unnatural darkness. Hidden behind a massive boulder carved by wind and rain to resemble a giant human skull, was a small cave entrance, completely choked by thick, thorny vines. What struck Silas as deeply unnerving was the flora around the cave. The grass and bushes were withered, blackened, and dead, as if poisoned by a concentrated aura of death. Driven by a morbid curiosity and the desperate hope of treasure, Silas hacked away the vines and stepped inside. A gust of freezing wind blasted out, carrying the suffocating stench of mildew and the heavy, metallic tang of the necrotic chi. Silas gagged, fighting the urge to vomit. He struck a flint, shielding a tiny flame. The flickering light revealed that this was no natural cave. It was an ancient, subterranean burial chamber. In the center of the vast cavern rested a colossal coffin made of black loo wood, dark as pitch and massive as a boat. At the four corners of the coffin stood 4 stone statues of headless officials, their stone hands gripping halberds. Talismans painted in fresh, coagulated blood clung to the wood, looking as if they had been brushed on only yesterday. Greed and the hypnotic pull of the underworld urged Silas forward. He used his machete to pry at the heavy lid. The black wood was hard as iron, but fueled by the adrenaline of a desperate man, the lid slowly groaned and gave way. With a sound like a dying woman's shriek, the lid burst open. Silas held his breath and peered inside. There was no gold. No jade. Inside lay only a desiccated skeleton dressed in the rotting, moth-eaten robes of a high-ranking ancient mandarin. But what made Silas's blood run cold was the creature sleeping peacefully in the crook of the skeleton's bony arms. It was a feline, but far larger than any domestic cat. Its fur was as black as a starless night, sleek and shimmering with an oily sheen. It had unusually long, pointed ears that twitched even in sleep, and a tail as long as a whip, wrapped tightly around the skeleton's cervical vertebrae. Startled by the noise, the creature opened its eyes. They were not the eyes of a beast. They were a glowing, blood-red, burning like two embers from the deepest pits of hell. It stared at Silas, unblinking, unafraid. It bared its fangs, needle-sharp and bone-white, and let out a low, vibrating growl. Silas tried to run, but his legs were lead. The creature slowly stepped out of the coffin. It moved with a fluid, weightless grace, gliding over the dusty floor. It approached Silas, rubbed its cold, dark head against his ankle, and let out a mournful, drawn-out mew that sounded exactly like a starving infant crying in the dark. Suddenly, something caught Silas's eye at the very bottom of the coffin, beneath where the creature had been lying. It was an exquisite wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Trembling, he reached in and opened it. Inside, resting on yellow silk, was a statue of the Guanine of the South Sea, carved from a single piece of imperial mutton fat jade. It glowed with a soft, ethereal, holy light. Silas knew instantly that this artifact was worth a kingdom's ransom. He quickly hid the jade in his robes and looked down at the black creature. "You are the Nether Cat, the guardian of this tomb, aren't you?" Silas whispered, his mind clouded by a strange, supernatural compulsion. "I will spare you. Follow me, and I will feed you." The creature purred, a sound like grinding stones, and leaped obediently into his arms. Silas clutched the jade and the Nether Cat, fleeing the tomb. As he emerged from the forest, a bizarre phenomenon occurred. The thorny vines and dense undergrowth that had blocked his path earlier now withered and parted, bowing down to the earth as if paying homage to the dark creature hidden in his tunic. He returned to the village under the light of a full moon. But the moonlight tonight was not its usual warm gold. It cast a sickly, pale green luminescence over the earth, bathing the village in a ghostly, macabre glow. The air was dead silent. No crickets chirped. No frogs croaked. It was as if all of nature was holding its breath in terror. As Silas stepped through his garden gate, his loyal hound, Ink, a massive wolfdog mix feared by thieves for miles, let out a sound. It wasn't a bark. It was a high-pitched, agonizing wail. Ink backed into the corner of the courtyard, its tail tucked so tightly between its legs it touched its belly. Its legs shook violently, and its eyes rolled back, showing only the whites, staring in absolute terror at the bundle in Silas's arms. The Nether Cat poked its black head out. It let out a soft, hissing rattle. The sound was tiny, like wind through dry reeds, but it carried the chill of the grave. Instantly, Ink let out a choked gasp, foamed at the mouth, and collapsed. The great hound convulsed once, twice, and then lay still, its eyes frozen in a mask of sheer, unadulterated horror. Silas stood paralyzed, cold sweat soaking his linen shirt. He had dealt with corpses his whole life, but he had never witnessed a creature with such overwhelming, demonic authority. A single hiss had stopped the heart of a fierce guard dog. He knew then, with absolute certainty, that he had not brought home a pet. He had brought home a demon. The front door slid open. Evelyn stepped out, holding a flickering oil lamp, rubbing her eyes in annoyance. "What are you doing standing in the yard like a ghost? Why is the dog making that racket? You're waking the dead." She stepped onto the porch and saw the dead hound. She gasped, nearly dropping the lamp. "Heavens! Ink! What happened to it? Did you kill it?" Silas ignored her. He walked past her into the house and placed the Nether Cat on an old woven mat. The cat stretched, its claws scraping the mat with a sound like nails on a chalkboard, leaving deep white gouges. It sat in the corner, its red eyes locked onto Evelyn. Evelyn finally noticed the animal. She scowled. You wander off all day, bring no money, and drag home a mangy, black stray? We don't even have enough rice for ourselves, and you bring home another mouth to feed? And look at its eyes, they look like a demon's. She raised her foot to kick the creature. Don't! Silas roared, his voice cracking like a whip. Don't you dare touch it! Evelyn flinched, startled by the ferocity in his usually submissive voice. She glared at him, ready to curse him out, but Silas quickly reached into his robes and pulled out the mother-of-pearl box. He placed it on the wooden table and opened it. Under the dim, yellow light of the oil lamp, the imperial jade guanine radiated a mesmerizing, heavenly glow. Evelyn's eyes widened, reflecting the green light of the jade. She dropped the lamp, shattering it, and lunged for the box. Her hands trembled as she stroked the cool, flawless stone. Heavens, is this real? Jade? Where did you get this? Silas snapped the box shut. His voice dropped to a grave, serious whisper. Do not ask questions. It is a blessing from the heavens. But this blessing is heavy, wife. The question is whether your shoulders are broad enough to bear its weight. Evelyn looked from her husband to the black cat. Greed completely blinded her to the supernatural dread in the room. She smiled, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I can bear it. With money, we can have anything. But what does this ugly beast have to do with the jade? Silas leaned in, whispering as if the walls had ears. It is the god of wealth. A divine spirit guarding the treasure. Listen to me carefully. From now on, you must treat it as you would our ancestors. Feed it the finest meat. Never let it go hungry. Never strike it. And absolutely, never stare into its eyes for too long. Do you understand? Evelyn nodded eagerly, her mind already dancing in palaces of silk and gold. She had no idea that the price of this wealth would be paid in blood and agony. That very night, the haunting began. After they went to bed, Evelyn clutched the jade box to her chest, smiling in her sleep. Silas lay awake, his eyes darting around the dark room. The Nether Cat was not sleeping on the mat. It had leaped onto the ancestral altar, the most sacred space in the home. It lay curled up right beside the incense burner, its head resting on its paws. Its eyes were closed, but its long, pointed ears swiveled constantly, tracking the unseen spirits in the dark. Outside, the wind began to howl, whistling through the broken roof tiles, sounding like the wailing of widows. The oil lamp on the altar flickered violently. The shadow of the Nether Cat cast against the peeling lime wall did not look like a cat. It stretched and warped, taking the shape of a massive, crouching tiger, or perhaps a demon waiting to pounce. In the dead of night, Evelyn woke up with a start. She couldn't breathe. A crushing weight pinned her chest, like a millstone. She tried to call out to Silas, but her throat was paralyzed. She forced her eyes open and looked down. The Nether Cat was crouching directly on her sternum. In the gloom, its red eyes burned like coals, staring deep into her soul. This was not the look of an animal. It was a look of profound contempt, of ancient, festering hatred. It leaned its dark, furry face inches from hers. Its breath was freezing, carrying the stench of coagulated blood and wet graveyard earth. Evelyn wanted to scream, to thrash, but she was bound by an invisible, supernatural force. Tears of pure terror streamed down her temples. The cat slowly bared its teeth. Its rough, sandpaper tongue darted out and licked her neck, right over her pulsing carotid artery. A sensation of icy death shot down her spine. She was sure she was going to die, her throat torn out by this monster. But it didn't bite. It merely licked her once, marking her as prey. Then, it casually stepped off her chest, padded silently to the door, and vanished into the pitch-black night. Evelyn gasped, sitting up drenched in cold sweat. She shook Silas violently. "Husband! Wake up! The cat, it tried to kill me." Silas groaned, rubbing his eyes. "You're having nightmares again. The cat is on the altar." "What nonsense is this?" "No. It was on my chest. It licked my neck." "It's a demon," she sobbed, pointing at the door. Silas sighed, sitting up to light his bamboo pipe. The ember illuminated his gaunt, hollowed face. He took a long drag, exhaling a cloud of thick smoke. "I told you. It is a divine spirit. It is testing the master of the house. If your heart is wicked, if you harbor treacherous thoughts, it will know. Treat it with respect, or face its wrath." He lay back down, turning his back to her, leaving her shivering in the dark. Evelyn looked toward the altar. In the shadows, the two red eyes of the Nether Cat gleamed, mocking her, challenging her sanity. By the next morning, the news of Silas's windfall had swept through the village like a plague. Whispers of buried imperial gold and ghostly blessings filled the tea houses. Silas took a small, broken fragment of the jade statue to the provincial capital and sold it to a foreign antiquities dealer. He lied, saying it was just a piece of rubble he'd found, but even that fragment bought him a fortune that would have taken 10 lifetimes to earn. With the money, Silas tore down the dilapidated thatch house. In its place, he built a magnificent traditional mansion. 3 compartments, 2 wings, roofed with glazed green tiles. The pillars were made of dark ironwood, and the floors were paved with red batrang bricks. He bought ebony couches, rosewood cabinets, and antique calligraphy scrolls. Evelyn transformed from a barefoot peasant into a wealthy matriarch. She threw away her brown hemp clothes and draped herself in vibrant, embroidered silks. She adorned herself with heavy gold bangles and jade necklaces that clinked with every step. But despite the opulence, the house was cursed with a perpetual, bone-chilling cold. Even at high noon, stepping over the threshold felt like entering an ice cellar. And everywhere you looked, you felt the prickle of unseen eyes watching you. The Nether Cat grew larger. Its fur became like spun midnight. It refused to eat fish or rice. It demanded raw meat. Every day, Evelyn had to order the servants to buy the finest, freshest beef, sliced thin. If the meat was even slightly old, the cat would sniff it, knock the plate to the floor, and leap onto the altar, glaring at her with murderous intent. The villagers began to whisper in terror. Those who walked past the mansion at night claimed to see a shadow on the tiled roof, a creature the size of a 3-year-old child, with eyes like lanterns, crying with the voice of a murdered infant. As the wealth grew, so did Evelyn's wickedness. She began to despise Silas, viewing his aged, weathered face as an insult to her new status. She frequently claimed to be going to the pagoda to pray, but in truth, she was meeting a young, arrogant lover named Tristan. Tristan was the son of the village head, a notorious playboy known for his squandered wealth and wandering hands. He didn't just desire Evelyn's beauty, he coveted the mountain of gold in her mansion. He showered her with sweet nothings, and soon, Evelyn fell into his arms, completely forgetting the old man who kept the god of wealth happy. One sweltering afternoon, while Silas was away, Evelyn smuggled Tristan into the house. They locked the heavy wooden doors and retreated to the master bedroom. As they lay tangled in the silk sheets, lost in their illicit passions, Tristan suddenly froze. His face drained of all color, turning the shade of ash. Evelyn, what is that?" he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the ceiling. Evelyn looked up. Her blood turned to ice. Clinging to the main wooden beam directly above the bed was the Nether Cat. Its claws were dug deep into the ironwood. Its head hung upside down, its red eyes locked onto the naked lovers. It wasn't just looking at them, it was glaring with a fury that transcended the animal kingdom. Saliva dripped from its jaws, sizzling as it hit Tristan's bare shoulder like boiling acid. Tristan screamed, a high, piercing sound, and scrambled for his clothes, fleeing the house without looking back. Evelyn sat on the bed, paralyzed. She looked at the cat, then glanced at the large bronze mirror on the vanity. In the reflection, the shadow of the cat on the ceiling wasn't a beast. It was the silhouette of a headless man in ancient Mandarin robes, blood gushing from his severed neck, spraying across the room. Evelyn fainted dead away on the silk sheets. After that terrifying afternoon, Evelyn fell deathly ill. She lay in bed for 3 days, babbling about headless ghosts and burning red eyes. Silas had to force rice water down her throat and burn spirit paper at the 4 corners of the bed to soothe her wandering soul. But when she recovered, her fear had mutated into a blinding, greedy rage. The sight of the gold bars Silas secretly melted down had completely corrupted her mind. She convinced herself the horror was just a hallucination born of weakness. The mansion was now a fortress of luxury. Evelyn hired maids and servants, treating them like dirt. She wore the finest winter silks and painted her lips with crushed cinnabar. She forced Silas to eat at a small, separate table with chipped ceramic bowls, while she dined on bird's nest soup using ivory chopsticks. "Clean yourself up, old man," she would sneer, picking her teeth with a silver toothpick. "You smell like a corpse. It ruins my appetite." Silas would just eat his dry rice in silence, his eyes always drifting to the altar, where the Nether Cat slept. He would sigh, a sound heavy with the weight of impending doom. He knew Evelyn was sliding down a path of no return, and the karma she was brewing would soon drown them all. The Nether Cat's diet became even more bizarre. Silas had to go to the butcher and buy a fresh, still beating pig's heart. He would place it on a porcelain plate before the altar, light 3 joss sticks, and chant obscure, guttural sutras. Only then would the cat descend, tear the heart apart with its claws, and crunch the bone and gristle, the sound echoing sickeningly in the silent house. After eating, it would lick the blood from its chops and scan the room, the undisputed king of its domain. Evelyn hated the creature with a passion that bordered on madness. She tried to slip rat poison into its meat, but whenever she held the poison, her limbs would lock up, a blinding pain would split her skull, and she would hear the weeping of 1,000 dead souls. Terrified, she would throw the poison away, but her hatred only festered. Naturally, Tristan returned. His lust and greed outweighed his fear. He reasoned that he must have been tricked by the dim light and his own guilty conscience. He began sneaking in when Silas was in the fields. One twilight, Evelyn prepared a lavish banquet of wine and roasted meats for Tristan. She wore a sheer silk tunic, her skin glowing in the light of the red lanterns. She poured the wine, laughing seductively. "Tristan, my love," she purred. "When will you take me away from this dead man?" "Soon, my beauty," Tristan laughed, grabbing her waist. "Once the old man kicks the bucket, this whole mansion is ours." Crash! The jade wine cup in Tristan's hand shattered. Red wine splashed across his face like blood. Both of them looked up. Perched on top of the rosewood cabinet was the Nether Cat. Its fur was standing on end, its tail puffed up to the size of a broom. Its eyes were twin furnaces of hellfire. It opened its mouth and let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated the teacups on the table. Evelyn, emboldened by wine and her lover's presence, stood up and grabbed a feather duster. "You filthy beast! Ruining my evening! Get out!" She swung the duster at it. The cat didn't flinch. It simply opened its jaws and exhaled a thick, black miasma. The stench of rotting corpses and sulfur hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She choked, her eyes watering, the room spinning wildly. Through the haze, she looked at Tristan. But it wasn't Tristan anymore. His face was melting, the skin sloughing off to reveal a grinning skull, maggots crawling from his empty eye sockets. Evelyn screamed and collapsed. Tristan, terrified, reached for her, but as his hand touched her silk robe, it felt like touching a block of ice. The cat dropped from the cabinet, a blur of black shadow, and slashed across Tristan's cheek. 3 deep, bleeding furrows appeared on his face. He howled in agony and fled into the night. Silas returned home just as Tristan was running out the gate. Silas didn't look surprised. He walked past his unconscious wife, knelt by the cat, and stroked its head. Good boy. You drove away the evil spirits. But her karma is too heavy. I fear I cannot protect her much longer. When Evelyn woke, her hatred had crystallized into a murderous resolve. One mountain cannot hold 2 tigers, she thought. If I don't kill that beast, it will kill me. She couldn't do it herself. She needed help. She sent a secret message to Tristan, meeting him at a secluded tea house at the edge of the village. Her face was gaunt, her eyes bloodshot. I can't live with that demon, she hissed. Kill it, or we're dead. Tristan, sporting a nasty, festering scar on his cheek, sneered. I have a plan. But we have to get the old man out of the way first. On the day of the ghost festival, the old man always goes to the Lonely Soul's shrine on the peak to burn paper money. You fake an illness. Tell him you need him to pray for your soul. I'll ambush him on the mountain path. A push off the cliff, and it looks like an accident. Then, I'll take my hunting rifle and blow that cat's brains out. Evelyn nodded, her soul entirely damned. 2 days later, on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, the Ghost Festival, when the gates of hell swing wide and the air is thick with wandering spirits, Evelyn put the plan into motion. She rubbed chalk on her face to look pale, writhed on the bed, and wailed about ghosts dragging her to the underworld. I need you to go to the Lonely Soul's shrine, she gasped. Burn the 3 sacrifice offering. Save my soul, husband. Silas looked at her. His eyes were devoid of warmth, deep and cold as the river bottom. Very well. Life and death are dictated by heaven. I will go. He packed the offerings. As he stepped out the door, the Nether Cat dropped from the rafters, rubbing against his legs. Silas smiled sadly. You want to come? Fine. Let us see who is the hunter, and who is the prey. Up on the misty, treacherous mountain path, Tristan waited behind a boulder, a heavy iron dowel, sword, in his hands. The fog was thick, smelling of wet pine and decay. He heard the clop-clop of Silas's bamboo cane. As the old man neared the edge of the abyss, Tristan lunged. Die, old man. But Silas moved with the speed of a viper. He sidestepped, bringing his bamboo cane down hard on Tristan's wrist. The sword clattered away, tumbling into the endless mist below. Tristan stumbled, catching himself on a root, dangling over the abyss. Silas stood over him, his face an impassive mask. Tristan! You are a fool. Did you think murder was so easy? Before Tristan could react, a black blur erupted from Silas's basket. The Nether Cat landed squarely on Tristan's face. Its claws, sharp as razors, dug into his flesh, peeling skin from bone. Tristan shrieked, a sound of pure agony, batting blindly at the demon. But the cat was a phantom, leaping from his shoulder to his head, tearing at his eyes, his nose, his mouth. Blood sprayed into the fog. In his delirium of pain, Tristan looked up and saw Silas transform. The old man grew into a towering judge of the underworld, holding the book of life and death. Mercy! Mercy! Tristan sobbed, crawling backward from the edge. The cat leaped off him, sitting calmly, blocking his path. Silas sighed. I will not kill you. I will let you live to pay the blood debt you and that wicked woman owe. Silas turned and walked away into the fog, the cat trotting beside him. Tristan was left weeping, his face a ruined mask of raw meat. And then, from the rocks, the bushes, the crevices, thousands of red eyes appeared. Venomous snakes, centipedes, and scorpions, drawn by the scent of fresh blood, began to swarm. Tristan barely survived, crawling back to the village like a mutilated beggar. When Evelyn saw his ruined, bandaged face, her fear vanished, replaced by a cold, demonic fury. If the cat wouldn't die by poison, and her lover couldn't kill it, she would do it herself. She hired Master Gideon, a renowned Taoist exorcist from the deep mountains, famous for subduing fierce ghosts and breaking death curses. He carried a peachwood sword and a sealed clay jar containing a powerful spirit effigy. When Master Gideon entered the mansion, he shivered. The energy here, it's heavier than a mass grave. There is a vengeful spirit, and a demonic beast cultivating in the shadows. Evelyn threw a tray of silver ingots at his feet. Master, save me. Exorcise that monster. Master Gideon set up a grand altar in the main hall. He drew bagua mirrors, hung yellow talismans, and lit black candles. He ordered all the doors closed. Whatever happens, do not open your eyes, he warned Evelyn. He began to chant, swinging the peachwood sword, spraying rice wine into the fire to create bursts of blue flame. The atmosphere was thick with incense and spiritual pressure. Suddenly, a soft thud echoed. The Nether Cat sat in the center of the altar. It didn't look afraid of the fire or the swords. It calmly lifted a hind leg and began to groom its dark fur. Insolent beast! Master Gideon roared. Kneel before the heavenly master. He threw a talisman at the cat. The cat caught the talisman in its mouth, chewed it, and swallowed it. Then, it looked at Master Gideon. And it smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever seen a cat smile? A true, human smile. The corners of its mouth stretched back past its ears, revealing rows of flat, white, human teeth. The sound that came from its throat was not a meow, but a dry, hacking laughter, like an old man coughing up blood, mixed with the giggles of a drowning child. Master Gideon's face turned the color of ash. The clay jar at his hip suddenly cracked. Black, foul-smelling liquid leaked out. My spirit effigy, it's dead. It died of fear. The cat's shadow on the wall expanded, taking the shape of a headless official holding his own severed head. Ghost. A headless ghost possessing a beast. Run! Master Gideon screamed. He vomited a mouthful of black blood, dropped his sword, and fled the house, tearing his robes in his panic. Evelyn fell to her knees, weeping in despair. The cat hopped onto the ebony couch, licked its paw, and looked at her. I spare you for now, its eyes seemed to say. But your life belongs to me. Evelyn's mind finally snapped. She would drown the beast in the Mourning River. She waited for a day when Silas went to inspect the fields. She grabbed a thick burlap sack and a heavy hemp rope. She crept up to the couch. Miraculously, the cat was asleep. With a swift motion, she threw the sack over it and tied the rope tight. The sack was incredibly heavy, like it was filled with wet stones, and it smelled strongly of copper and rot. But Evelyn, blinded by adrenaline, didn't care. She threw the sack over her shoulder, put on her conical rain hat, and ran out into the torrential monsoon rain. The Mourning River was raging, brown and violent. She stood on the muddy bank, swung the heavy sack, and hurled it into the swirling rapids. Splash! It sank immediately. Evelyn fell to her knees in the mud, laughing hysterically. Dead. You're dead. But then, the river began to bubble. The water turned a murky, bloody red. The burlap sack floated back to the surface, drifting toward the bank. The rope untied itself. Evelyn squinted through the rain. A hand reached out of the sack. It wasn't a paw. It was a human hand, pale and bloated. Then a head emerged. Hair plastered with mud, skin purple and swollen, eyes wide and white. It was Tristan. Tristan! Evelyn shrieked, scrambling backward in the mud. No! I threw the cat. Why are you here? The corpse's mouth opened, river water pouring out. Evelyn, why did you drown me? It's cold down there. Driven mad by terror, Evelyn ran. She ran through the mud, tearing her silk robes, screaming until her throat bled. She burst through the gates of her mansion. The house was warm. The lanterns were lit. Silas was sitting at the tea table, calmly sipping from a porcelain cup. And sitting right next to him, dry and pristine, was the Nether Cat. It looked at her and slowly curled its lip in a mocking smile. You. Evelyn pointed a trembling, muddy finger. I drowned you. I saw you in the river. Silas set his cup down. His eyes were bottomless pits of sorrow and coldness. What did you throw in the river, Evelyn? You threw in your own sin. The Nether Cat has the power of soul swapping. When you tied that sack, you bound the soul of the one you loved most. You drowned your own lover with your own hands. Evelyn's legs gave out. She wailed, a sound of pure, unadulterated madness. Tristan! I killed you. The cat hopped down and approached her. It whispered in a voice that sounded like grinding tombstones. Evelyn looked into its red eyes and saw her own reflection, and behind her, the bloated, rotting ghost of Tristan, reaching for her throat. Demons! Ghosts! I'll kill you all! Evelyn snapped. She grabbed a pair of heavy iron fabric shears from the table and lunged at Silas, stabbing him squarely in the back. Thud! There was no blood. No scream. It felt like she had stabbed a bag of dry husks. Silas slowly turned his head. His neck rotated a full 180 degrees with a sickening crack. His face was desiccated, the skin pulled tight over the skull, his eyes empty, black holes. You wicked woman, Silas's jaw moved, the sound like dry wood rubbing together. Did you forget? The night I brought the cat home, the miasma of the tomb took my life. I died in the cold. The Nether Cat used its demonic energy to animate my corpse, just so I could watch how you would treat this house. I have been dead for months, Evelyn. As he spoke, Silas's body crumbled. The clothes collapsed, and a pile of gray, dusty bones clattered onto the wooden floor. The skull rolled to a stop, its empty sockets staring at her. Evelyn screamed, turning to run. But the front doors were blocked. Pouring through the gates, covering the courtyard like a black, writhing carpet, were thousands of rats. Huge, sewer rats with red eyes and yellow teeth. At the head of the swarm, sitting atop a stone lion, was the Nether Cat. It threw its head back and let out a long, demonic howl. The swarm surged forward. They climbed the walls, flooded the room. They leaped onto Evelyn, biting, tearing, gnawing. She thrashed, screaming for help, but the sea of fur and teeth swallowed her. The sound of tearing silk, tearing flesh, and cracking bones filled the grand mansion, mixing with the thunder outside. Through the agony, she saw the ghost of Tristan join the rats, biting into her legs, exacting his revenge. The Nether Cat watched from above, its red eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a completed karmic cycle. The next morning, the villagers awoke to the smell of smoke. The grand mansion was engulfed in strange, green-tinged flames that no amount of river water could quench. It burned until nothing was left but white ash. When the village headmen sifted through the ruins, they vomited. In the center of the hall, they found a charred skeleton, its fingers clawing into the dirt. Surrounding it was a massive mound of tiny, burned rat bones. They never found Silas's bones. They only found the mother-of-pearl box, melted and empty. Days later, fishermen pulled Tristan's bloated corpse from the river. Around his neck was a deep, purple bruise in the exact shape of a hemp rope, though no rope was ever found. As for the Nether Cat, it vanished in the fire. But on misty nights, the fishermen of the Mourning River claimed to see a man in a brown hemp robe walking along the banks, a massive black cat with glowing red eyes perched on his shoulder. They say Silas and the beast are still walking the earth, bound by karma, hunting the wicked in the shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, the law of karma is a net, the mesh is wide, but nothing escapes it. Evelyn's greed, Tristan's lust, and Silas's defiance of the natural order by harboring a demon all led to their gruesome ends. The mansion is now a cursed mound of weeds, known as the Ghost Hill. When the wind blows through the reeds, some say it sounds like the laughing of a cat and the weeping of the damned. This concludes today's Midnight Ghost Story. May you reflect on the weight of your own actions, and may your conscience remain clear when the lights go out. Good night, and may the heavens protect you.